The PS01 was the 2001 challenger built by the Minardi Formula One team, a popular little team from Faenza in Italy that had more determination than money and engine power. 2001 would have a very difficult start to their season, as the team's technical partnership with Fondametal had just collapsed, and the team no longer had permanent access to a wind tunnel. In January that year, the team would be purchased from its founder Giancarlo Minardi by Australian businessman Paul Stoddart, and with the help of the airline that he owned and a new base in Ledbury in the United Kingdom, Minardi managed to finish their new PS01s just in time for the start of the season. The car was predictably slow. Minardi's cars were always regarded as well designed, but never really had the engine power or the funds to make them much faster than backmarkers. And that was what Minardi ultimately was, a perennial backmarker team, very popular even to this day, but never fast enough to be serious contenders for anything. The Minardi PS01 was powered by a Ford VJ Zetec R 3-litre V10 engine, rebadged as European after Stoddart's airline, and it would be driven by 3 drivers across the 16-round 2001 season: Brazilian Tasso Marquez, who would be replaced for the last 3 rounds by Malaysian driver Alex Young, and some Spanish rookie who just seems really forgettable, like Alfonso something or other. I'm sure he won't be important. It's not like he's went on to win championships and would still be driving Formula One cars more than 20 years later. As you might have already guessed, the Minardi PS01 was not a fast car, and was always finishing outside of the points. Had it been using the 2026 points system, this car would have scored 5 points, but because this was the 2002 points system, it scored nothing, and therefore finished 11th and last. Technically, it didn't even classify. From 1995 to 2004, the Minardi team scored a grand total of 5 points. This simply wasn't sustainable for the team, and even though 2005 was better for the team, it still wasn't enough to help them from finishing last, and Paul Stoddart had to sell the team to Red Bull, who promptly renamed the Faenza-based outfit to Scuderia Toro Rosso, the Italian translation of Red Bull. For that season, the team would essentially reuse the previous year's 2005 Red Bull car, the RB1, this time relabelled as the STR1, and the team would also make use of a deal that the Minardi team had negotiated the year prior to use restricted V10s for the first year of the new V8 formula. There was a lot of controversy around this, as the other teams believed that Toro Rosso would be the class of the field, simply because the V10s were known to be much more powerful than the V8s. But these concerns proved to be unfounded, as the STR1 was not particularly fast, for a variety of complicated technical reasons that I shan't go into. The STR1 would be driven across the season by Italian driver Vittorio Liuzzi and American Scott Speed. Together, these 2 drivers would generally finish just outside the top 10 for the majority of the season, the STR1 simply never being developed far enough to prove to be anything more than a midfielder. But the car would go on to score 1 single point at the hands of Liuzzi at the United States Grand Prix in Indianapolis. This 1 point was more than enough to help the team secure 9th place in the 2006 Constructors' Championship, ahead of Midland and Super Aguri. The last V10-powered F1 car continues to compete to this day, obviously not in Formula One, but in the Boss GP racing series, a gentleman's historic racing series. Debuting at the 6th round of the 2008 season in Monaco, the Toro Rosso STR3 had a difficult and delayed development and also a parts shortage that prevented it from being deployed any earlier. Driven by Sebastian Bourdais and Sebastian Vettel, the car was surprisingly competitive for a team that was supposed to be nothing more than a midfielder, and for the most part it was. But in the hands of Vettel, it was extremely competent. After a disastrous start to the season in the B-Spec STR2, where the team only managed one single points finish, the STR3 proved to be far more reliable, only retiring from races just 3 times. In the hands of Bourdais, the car was mediocre, as he would only score a single 7th place finish at the Belgian Grand Prix. But for Vettel, it was magical, and it really proved his mettle to the senior Red Bull team. He would score points at all but 4 races that he competed in the STR3, and one of those points finishes was none other than his historic maiden victory at the Italian Grand Prix, where he also scored pole position in a Toro Rosso. The torrential rain conditions may have had something to do with it, but, well, it more than proved what kind of driver Vettel was. Getting pole position in a midfield car and then leading practically every lap in a midfield car and winning in a midfield car that just a few years beforehand had been a Minardi. Truly spectacular stuff. That performance alone earned Vettel his promotion to the Red Bull team, and that victory enabled Toro Rosso to finish ahead of Red Bull, the senior team, for the only time in its history to date, finishing 6th with 39 points. One other neat little factoid: the 2008 Italian Grand Prix was the only Grand Prix won by a Ferrari-engined car that wasn't actually a Ferrari. Hey everyone, I can't help but noticing that 92% of my viewers are not subscribed. And you know, that's okay. You don't have to subscribe. I can't force you to. But it would really help me out if you hit that big red button next to my channel name and subscribed and hit the bell. And if you really like my content, you can join my channel memberships as well. There should be a blue button down there somewhere. You can get early access to my videos for as little as £1 a month, or $1, or $1.49 if you're Australian, or $1.99 Brazilian reals, or $5.99 South African rand. Whatever your country, it's dirt cheap. I'm just a one-man team, so I can offer little more than this, but it would really help my channel out if you did. Introduced for the first race of the 2010 Formula One season, the Toro Rosso STR5 was the first Toro Rosso to be designed completely in-house in Faenza, Italy, which also meant it was the first Toro Rosso to not be a Red Bull hand-me-down. This sounds great until you realise that those Red Bulls were designed by Adrian Newey, and now they were being designed by someone else. Not that it really mattered who designed the cars, because Toro Rossos weren't exactly cream of the crop in the first place. It was generally a trend that they were uncompetitive cars, with 2008 being the only outlying season. The STR5 continued this trend, with the car generally only picking up the occasional 9th or 10th places, with a single 8th place finish being the car's best finishing position. The STR5 would be driven by Jaime Alguersuari and Sebastian Buemi, and together they would score on just 7 occasions, enough for just 13 points and 9th in the Constructors' Championship, which was more than enough to finish ahead of the brand new Minot teams, but they were still quite a distance behind 8th placed Sauber. As such, the STR5 is considered a thoroughly unremarkable car, except for one incident. One incident where this car gained quite a bit of unintentional fame, just almost like the one I'm having here. That wasn't intentional. Nor was this one at the 2010 Chinese Grand Prix when in practice, the front wheels of Sebastian Buemi's STR5 both came off at exactly the same time when he hit the brakes. And through muscle memory he tried to steer the car away from the walls, even though he no longer had any wheels to steer with. Got to be one of the most oddest and bizarre incidents in Formula One history. For the 2011 season, Scuderia Toro Rosso retained their 2010 lineup of Alguersuari and Buemi to drive the STR6, the first Faenza-based Formula One car to run on Pirelli rubber since the Minardi M190. The STR6 was a notable improvement over its predecessor, able to score points much more frequently, and even picking up 4 double points finishes. An impressive set of results for a team that once upon a time would have made headlines just by scoring points. The pace of the Ferrari-powered car would improve slightly as the season went on, and the team would be embroiled in a season-long battle for 7th place in the Constructors' Championship with Sauber, though ultimately they would fall 3 points short and finish the season with 41 points and 8th place finish. The team's 2 drivers were closely matched, generally finishing very close to one another, though it was Alguersuari with the bragging rights by bagging the team's best finish of 2 7th places. However, despite their solid performances, neither driver's contracts would be renewed for the 2012 season onwards, and they would depart for greener pastures, or at least Buemi would, as he would go on to win 4 championships in the World Endurance Championship with Toyota. And he continues to see success with the team to this day, driving the Toyota TR010 hypercar. His most recent victory coming at the opening round of the 2026 season, the 6 Hours of Imola, driving the number 8 Toyota TR010. Alguersuari, on the other hand, decided to retire from motor racing at the age of 25 to focus on being a DJ instead. And apparently, he's quite good at it. But he also might be bad at it. I don't know, I'm not a DJist. Following the departure of Buemi and Alguersuari, Toro Rosso hired Jean-Eric Vergne and Australian rookie Daniel Ricciardo in his first full season in Formula One after he drove a few races for HRT the previous season. Together they drove the STR7, and the season didn't start too badly, with each driver picking up a points finish in the opening 2 rounds. But that initial promising start proved to be a false hope, as the car's pace proved to be a lot worse than initially thought. Both drivers would go several races without scoring a point, until upgrades came at the Belgian Grand Prix, and coupled with the chaos in the opening lap, that enabled the team to score their first points since the Malaysian Grand Prix, the second round of the season. From that point onwards, Ricciardo regularly finished in the lower points-paying positions, typically 9th and 10th, whilst Vergne would only ever score 4 8th places across the season. This smattering of points towards the end of the season was only enough to secure the team's middling 9th place position in the Constructors' Championship. They were clearly well ahead of the minnows that had joined in 2010, but were nowhere near the pace of even the Williams, which had managed to win a race earlier in the season. The STR7 was yet another unremarkable Toro Rosso, and this is par for the course for this team. Their cars just are never great, but they're never terrible either. At least, they're usually not terrible. The STR7 has seen little use after the 2012 season, for obvious reasons, though it has seen some use as a show car. I guess it's something. The V8 engine still sounds good. For 2013, Toro Rosso would retain its 2012 driver lineup of Daniel Ricciardo and Jean-Eric Vergne. Their car for that season was the unreliable and uncompetitive STR8, still powered by a Ferrari V8 engine, but this team had been using year-old specifications since the team's inception in 2006. This would be the second to last year that the team would use a year-old engine specification, though it was the last year of this particular streak. From 2014 onwards, Toro Rosso would be using the current specification engine, just like its sister team, Red Bull. Of the 19 Grand Prix that the STR8 competed in, at least one of the cars would DNF in 8 of those rounds, and then both cars would suffer a brake failure in the Korean Grand Prix, giving the team their only double DNF of the season, even if they were still technically classified. The 2012 spec Ferrari engine just wasn't up to par anymore, and team principal Franz Tost decided to look for an alternative, as the poor performance of the Ferrari engine just simply wasn't tenable anymore. He always had this goal that the team should finish 5th in the championship, no matter what, It was just a personal goal of his, and with these engines it just wasn't going to happen. So for 2014 onwards, the team would switch to Renault engines. Whilst the engine was not up to par, the chassis proved to be quite decent as the middle of the season rolled by. The team would score points semi-regularly, including their season best finish of a 6th place in Canada, courtesy of Verne. But Verne would only score 3 times across the season. After that 6th in Canada, he wouldn't score again, whilst Ricciardo was scoring much more regularly, typically scoring every 2 rounds. As such, Ricciardo would earn the lion's share of the 33 points that the team scored that season, which was more than enough for them to finish 8th in the Constructors' Championship, well ahead of the flagging Williams. And with Red Bull's Mark Webber retiring at the end of the season, that opened up the path to promotion for Ricciardo. After using Ferrari engines since 2007, Toro Rosso switched to Renault power for 2014. With Ricciardo now at Red Bull, his spot in the team was taken by Russian driver Daniil Kvyat. The new turbo-hybrid powered STR9 and its rather phallic-looking nose would prove to be a pretty decent package across the season, typically fighting in the lower midfield, but just never really getting much further than that. As with most of the teams in the early part of this season, the team suffered from extreme reliability issues, including a couple of double DNFs. Though as Renault brought in upgrades, the car's reliability improved likewise, and it was able to finish races much more frequently. Scoring, however, was still as infrequent as it had been in the early part of the season, perhaps even less so. In the hands of its new driver, Kvyat, the car was quite mediocre. Kvyat would never finish higher than 9th, and after a string of bad luck, he would lose his motivation, and he wouldn't score points again after the Belgian Grand Prix, the first round after the summer break. Verne, on the other hand, would score the car's best finish of a 6th place in Singapore, and he would score 22 of the team's 30 points that they managed to achieve that season, being the primary contributor to their 7th place finish in the Constructors' Championship, their 2nd best Constructors' Championship position to date. Having scored so many more points than his teammate that season and simply outperformed the Russian, you'd think that Verne would be promoted to Red Bull when Sebastian Vettel announced that he would be leaving the sister team for Ferrari for 2015. So you can imagine he might have been just a little bit pissed off when Red Bull announced that Kvyat would be the one to be promoted instead. Eventually Verne would leave the team, by his own volition or not, and he wound up having a pretty successful career in some electric sport of some kind. That's kind of dumb if you ask me. With Verne out, his seat in the team was open for a new driver, whose name also began with the 3 letters VER. With Kvyat promoted to Red Bull and Verne out of the team, Toro Rosso needed a brand new driver lineup for 2015 to drive the new STR10. They chose Spanish rookie Carlos Sainz and Dutch rookie Max Verstappen, a young man so highly rated that he was fast-tracked to skip GP2, then the 2nd highest tier of racing, to make his debut at the 2015 Australian Grand Prix as the youngest Formula One driver ever at the sprightly age of 17 years 166 days. Both drivers would impress over the season, contributing 67 points between themselves to enable the team to finish 7th in the Constructors' Championship for the second year running. Sainz's season could be divided into thirds. A decent first third, where he was scoring pretty much every race, an awful middle third, where he was not scoring at all and was retiring a lot, and a half-decent last third, where he got a few more points finishes before rounding out the season with 3 non-scores in a row. As for Max, his season could be divided into 2 parts. A rather tepid first half of the season, up to the Canadian Grand Prix, where he scored only a single 7th place, and then in the excellent run of form, where he would score in all but 3 of the remaining rounds from the Austrian Grand Prix onwards. Verstappen categorically outperformed Sainz, scoring not just many more points than the Spaniard, but also scoring better positions. Sainz's best finish was a single 7th place at the United States Grand Prix, but in the same race, Verstappen finished 4th, which was his second 4th place finish of the year, as he achieved the same result in Hungary a few races earlier. The STR10 was a pretty decent midfield race car with the Renault engines, but after just 2 years, Toro Rosso would abandon Renault after the parent company of Red Bull had a major falling out with the French manufacturer, and for 2016 the team would return to Ferrari power once more. Toro Rosso's car for the 2016 season, the STR11, would once again return to using year-old Ferrari power units. The car would initially be driven by the team's 2015 lineup of Sainz and Verstappen. Verstappen would score well in the first 3 rounds of the season, before having a retirement at the Russian Grand Prix, which ultimately proved to be his final race with Toro Rosso. At the Spanish Grand Prix, Verstappen would secure promotion to the sister team Red Bull, with Kvyat being demoted back to Toro Rosso after Kvyat had a few shunts with other drivers. This decision worked out rather well for Red Bull, as Verstappen would win on his Red Bull debut. Kvyat would score 10th in the same Grand Prix, and after that his season fell apart. He had clearly lost a lot of motivation, as he would only score 4 points with Toro Rosso across the season. Sainz would be much more successful than his new Russian teammate, scoring fairly frequently until the car's pace dropped off from the German Grand Prix, but he did manage a best finish of 3 6th places at the Spanish, USA and Brazilian Grand Prix. Kvyat's performance in the Toro Rosso that season can only really be described as shambolic, and it's a wonder that the team decided to keep him on for another year, as he simply wasn't up to scratch. He clearly needed to do a lot of soul-searching, as his performance would continue to degrade well into the next season. As for the STR11 itself, this particular Toro Rosso would prove to be the last of a number of things. It is to date the last Faenza-based car to use a Ferrari power unit, and it is also the last of the Toro Rossos to use the team's signature hand-painted bull motif on the engine covers. From 2017 onwards, the team would undergo a slight rebrand. Toro Rosso's new wide car for 2017, the STR12, would once again be powered by a Renault power unit, though given that the relationship between Red Bull and Renault was still not good, it was instead badged as a Toro Rosso engine, which is kind of strange. The car was also decked out in a brand new livery. Gone was the navy blue and the hand-painted bull motif. Now it was a more electric blue, with red stripes and a large silver bull instead, and a lot of people actually liked it. So much so that it's been called one of the best liveries in Formula One history. Just a shame it was on a Toro Rosso then, and not a car that was winning. The STR12 would be driven once again by the 2016 lineup of Carlos Sainz and Daniel Kvyat. However, by the end of the season, neither of those drivers would remain in the team. Carlos Sainz would be snapped up by Renault to replace Jolyon Palmer, and Kvyat would just be dropped entirely because his performance was so poor that he would only score 4 points before he was replaced by Pierre Gasly. In the hands of Sainz, the STR12 was pretty competitive, as he would score in almost every Grand Prix that he finished in, and he would score 48 of the team's 53 points that season, securing them 7th yet again. Kvyat, of course, only scored 4 before he was replaced by Gasly at the Malaysian Grand Prix. However, he made a brief comeback at the USA Grand Prix to replace Sainz, who is now at Renault, whilst Brendan Hartley replaced Gasly for one race for reasons that I can't remember. He would score 1 more point at the USA Grand Prix before he was finally booted from the team for good. For the meantime, at least. With Sainz and Kvyat now departed, Hartley and Gasly took their places, though neither of them could score another point for the team before the season's end. This was also the final Toro Rosso to be powered by a Renault engine. For 2018, they would take on a new power unit supplier, Honda, after the Japanese manufacturer's relationship with McLaren fell apart. Pierre Gasly and Brendan Hartley would continue to drive for Toro Rosso throughout 2018, driving the new Honda-powered STR13. Red Bull had been looking for an out on their forced reliance on Renault engines. Their relationship with the French manufacturer had plummeted, but they had no other choice because obviously Ferrari and Mercedes wouldn't want to end up powering their closest competitors. And of course Honda was simply far too unreliable, as 3 years with McLaren had proven. But Red Bull, so desperate to find an alternative, decided to give Honda a shot, and so Toro Rosso, the sister team, would practically sacrifice their 2018 season to assist Honda in developing their V6 power unit, so that Red Bull could take on Honda power from 2019 onwards. The car was predictably slow, and it didn't score very often, though when it did, it didn't do too badly, at least in the hands of Gasly. He would score the car's best finishing positions of a 7th in Monaco, a 6th in Hungary, and a scintillating 4th place finish in Bahrain, and his sentiment over the radio echoed what Fernando Alonso had said in the previous round in Australia. Now we can fight. Of course, McLaren ended up finishing far ahead of Toro Rosso at the end of the season, and the junior Red Bull team would have their worst season since 2012, as it would only score 33 points across the season and it'd bring an end to their streak of 7th place finishes in the Constructors, only managing 9th. Well ahead of Williams in 10th, but not close enough to Sauber in 8th. By the end of the season, one thing was clear. Pierre Gasly would be promoted to Red Bull to replace the Renault-bound Daniel Ricciardo, whilst Brendan Hartley would be dropped from the team altogether. Though, just like the aforementioned Sebastian Buemi, Hartley has gone on to have a very successful championship-laden stint with Toyota in the World Endurance Championship. Funny how that happens. For the 2019 season, Toro Rosso entered the STR14, driven by Thai driver Alexander Albon and the returning Russian driver Daniil Kvyat. Compared to his years at the team in 2016 and 17, Kvyat's form was much improved, and he would score far more frequently than he had done in those seasons. Albon would also score reasonably well, with a best finish of 6th in Germany, and going from pit lane to points in China. Owing to the much improved Honda engines, the STR14 was far more competitive than its predecessor, and it would score much more frequently as a result, including 5 double points finishes across the season, one of which was in Monaco. But the standout results came at the German and Brazilian Grand Prix. Up until the German Grand Prix, the team's season had been pretty solid, but once they got to the Hockenheim ring, the team's fortunes turned around in a good way. That Grand Prix was incredibly chaotic, and with both Mercedes practically out of the running, this allowed the Toro Rossos to perform extremely well. Albon in his aforementioned 6th place finish, and Kvyat picking up an unexpected and astonishing 3rd place, his first podium since China 2016, and the team's first podium since that magical victory at Monza in 2008. During the summer break, the two Red Bull-owned teams would play swapsies with drivers once again, with Pierre Gasly failing to impress at the senior outfit and being demoted back to Red Bull, whilst Alex Albon was given the chance to prove his mettle. Gasly would not take this promotion lying down, however, and he went on to perform pretty well in the second half of the season. And he would take his and the team's best result since 2008 at the Brazilian Grand Prix, another chaotic race, where he would pick up his first ever podium in the sport with a 2nd place finish, winning a drag race with the Mercedes of Lewis Hamilton. His elation over the radio could not be matched, and that podium secured the team's best ever result in the Constructors' Championship, 6th place with 85 points. Gasly and Kvyat would remain at the Faenza-based team for the truncated 2020 season, whilst the team underwent its first major rebranding since 2006. Gone was the name Scuderia Toro Rosso, in its place with Scuderia AlphaTauri. Like its predecessor that it was based upon, the new AlphaTauri AT01 was a competitive and solid midfield car, typically finishing between 7th and 12th, effectively starting the 2020 season in much the same place that the 2019 season had ended for the team, with points finishes punctuating the occasional non-scoring race. The car did have its issues, however. In the first round at the Austrian Grand Prix, Kvyat's car suffered a catastrophic suspension failure in the last few laps, and just 2 races later, Gasly's gearbox failed. In the very next round at the British Grand Prix, Kvyat suffered a tyre blowout at high speed going through Maggot's corner and had a heavy crash, which he fortunately came out of unscathed. And later on in the season, at the Imola Grand Prix, Gasly suffered a race-ending coolant leak just 8 laps into the race after a very strong qualifying session, where he qualified P4. Gasly's luck in Italy wasn't all bad, however. At the Grand Prix in Monza, he achieved a completely unforeseen result. Gasly had qualified in a mediocre P10, but after several crashes and retirements before the halfway point, he found himself third on the grid for a standing restart, with Lewis Hamilton ahead of him due to serve a stop-go penalty at the racing point of Lance Stroll fumbling his restart. That opened the way for Gasly to take an unprecedented lead that he would not relinquish, even under fierce assault from the McLaren of Carlos Sainz. After his sensational maiden podium in Brazil the previous year, Gasly took his maiden victory in the sport and the Faenza team's second overall. AlphaTauri would finish the season with 107 points, but it would only be enough for 7th place in this highly competitive season. For 2021, AlphaTauri entered the AT02, essentially a B-spec version of the AT01 as required by the adapted 2021 rules. Pierre Gasly would be retained by the team, whilst Daniel Kvyat had had his time in Formula One and was replaced by Japanese rookie Yuki Tsunoda. The AT02 proved itself to be an extremely capable midfield car, capable of even finishing in the top 5, on rare occasions. Pierre Gasly would score the vast majority of the team's points that season, as he would only fail to score 7 times across the 22-round season. Gasly even managed to stand on the podium in Azerbaijan, a chaotic race which saw Max Verstappen retire from the lead and Lewis Hamilton mess up his brake magic on the restart. By finishing in 3rd place, that meant that Gasly's first 3 podiums in the sport were on each step of the podium. Gasly would routinely finish in the top 7 following this race, picking up 2 5th places in Hungary and Abu Dhabi, and 2 4th places in the Netherlands and Mexico City. Tsunoda, on the other hand, impressed by picking up points on his Formula One debut, but he lost his motivation somewhere along the line after a string of bad luck and some crashes. However, he would still continue to score the occasional points finish, and he would score his season and career best at the final round in Abu Dhabi by overtaking Valtteri Bottas on the controversial final lap and picking up P4. 2021 would ultimately prove to be the best season that the Faenza team has achieved to date, as the team would go on to finish the season 6th place in the Constructors' Championship with 142 points, blowing their 2019 season out of the water. This was despite the fact that the STR14 from 2019 had scored more than 1 podium, a feat that no Faenza car has achieved before or since. For 2022, AlphaTauri entered the new ground effect era with the AT03, retaining their 2021 driver lineup of Pierre Gasly and Yuki Tsunoda. The way they introduced this car was rather fitting, given the way that a lot of people pronounce their name. Tauri? Sounds like something from science fiction.
There's no one scheduled to come back for 24 hours. Who is it?
Scuderia AlphaTauri.
What?
there's a chance I'm not going to be able to keep that joke in this video, so... Anyway, back to the AT03. If there's one good thing I can say about this car, it's that it looked alright. And that's about it. That's the only positive thing anyone can say about the AT03, because it was a pile of dog shit. The team had their worst season since 2018, picking up just 35 points, which was only enough to finish 9th in the Constructors' Championship, ahead of Williams, who finished the season dead last with just 7-8 points. But they were in a reasonably close fight for 8th place, finishing the season just 2 points behind Haas. The car was truly abysmal. Even though Tsunoda would finish the first race of the season in 8th place, Gasly's car wouldn't finish, as it had conveniently burst into flames. In the next race in Saudi Arabia, it was Gasly's turn to finish in 8th, but Tsunoda wouldn't even get the opportunity to start. The best result the car managed all season was a 5th place in Azerbaijan, courtesy of Gasly. But when you look at the Wikipedia page, there's a lot of blue results on that points table. Past those first few rounds of the season, points finishes dried up like a pond in 2026 UK heat waves. This string of poor results convinced Gasly that, even though he was happy with the team, that he had to go elsewhere, and in the end Alpine would poach him to partner Esteban Ocon for 2023, and as such, Yuki Tsunoda became the team's leading driver. AlphaTauri had looked a lot more like Minardi than ever before in the 2022 season, and the team had to improve for 2023, which ultimately didn't happen. If anything, they became even more like Minardi, even if they still finished 8th in the Constructors' Championship. That 8th place makes it sound like they did much better, but they only scored 25 points across all 4 of their drivers. Yes, 4. The AlphaTauri driver situation this season was a complete mess. Yuki Tsunoda would be retained for the entire season, and he would predictably score the majority of the team's points. He was initially partnered by Dutchman Nick de Vries, who was a former Formula 2 champion, and he had impressed Helmut Marko after substituting for Alexander Albon at the 2022 Italian Grand Prix. But de Vries looked like a fish out of water, and he would be replaced by Daniel Ricciardo, who went 2 rounds before breaking his wrist in a crash at the Dutch Grand Prix. So he would then be replaced by New Zealander Liam Lawson, who went on to score a 9th place finish at the Singapore Grand Prix, before Ricciardo eventually came back once his wrist got better. And he would then score a 7th place finish at the Mexico City Grand Prix, which also happened to be the single best finishing result that the AT04 had achieved. That's the name of the car, by the way, I forgot to mention it. The car had been comfortably the slowest of the season until some upgrades finally came to the car and made it a bit faster. Before Liam Lawson's 9th place in Singapore, Yuki Tsunoda had only managed to finish 10th 3 times, and the team was comfortably last, behind even the struggling Alfa Romeo and Haas teams. But after a much improved last few races of the season, they picked up those 25 and eventually finished 8th. For 2024, the Faenza team would undergo yet another major rebrand. The AlphaTauri brand had taken a lot of hits in the past 2 seasons, and it was decided to rebrand the team once more to Racing Bulls, which was abbreviated to just RB in 2024. And the new Racing Bulls cars had a brand new acronym, along with the worst team name ever, Visa Cash App RB. Ugh. VCarb 01 was the car for this season, driven again by Yuki Tsunoda and Daniel Ricciardo. The team's livery returns to something rather reminiscent of the last Toro Rosso days, with a majority blue livery with a large white stripe and some smaller red stripes, as well as the return of the silver bull on the engine cover, which had been white or navy in the AlphaTauri years. The VCarb 01 sort of carried on from where its predecessor had left off, scoring infrequently, and it never really improved much beyond that. The best result it managed all season were 3 7th places at the hands of Tsunoda, whilst Daniel Ricciardo could only manage a best of 8th in Canada. In fact, Ricciardo only scored 3 times across the season, and his performances was frequently so poor that the Red Bull family decided to say goodbye to him for the final time. He would be booted from the team after the Singapore Grand Prix and replaced by a familiar face, New Zealander Liam Lawson, who scored with 9th on his re-debut with the team. RB would go on to score 46 points across the 2024 season, which was again enough to finish 8th place in the Constructors' Championship, ahead of the struggling Williams and Sauber teams. They would have finished 7th in the Constructors if not for those pesky Alpines getting a double podium in Sao Paulo. For 2025, the now unabbreviated Racing Bulls team would field the VCarb 02 in a largely white livery with a very Red Bull-esque bull on the engine cover. The team would initially field Yuki Tsunoda alongside French rookie Isaac Hadjar. However, after just 2 races, Tsunoda would be promoted to Red Bull, and Liam Lawson, who had been promoted to Red Bull for this season, was demoted back to Racing Bulls to take Yuki's place. Just like its predecessor, the VCarb 02 was an infrequent scorer, though when it did score, it was scoring very well, picking up 3 double points finishes, including a 6-8 in Monaco. Not a bad result at all. Usually when the car was scoring, it was in the lower half of the points, but on 2 occasions they would pick up double points finishes. Liam Lawson would finish 5th at the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and just 2 races earlier, Hadjar would pick up an unexpected 3rd place finish in the Netherlands, after qualifying P4 and being in the right place to capitalise on the race retirement of championship contender Lando Norris. Hadjar would score more frequently than Lawson, and would typically finish ahead of the New Zealander, which would ultimately secure Hadjar's promotion to the senior team for the 2026 season, whilst Lawson remained on as the now leading driver at Racing Bulls, in a situation that feels very much like what Pierre Gasly went through in 2019. Though, as we'll see later, this isn't quite the case anymore. The VCarb 02 would go on to score 92 points across the 24-race season, which was enough to finish 6th place in the Constructors' Championship. Just 3 points ahead of the struggling Aston Martin, but well behind the much improved Williams. For the 2026 Formula One season, VCarb would take on a new engine supplier. Sort of. Red Bull powertrains coupled with Ford, making this the second Ford-powered team on the grid since something like 2003. At the time of recording, the Dutch Grand Prix is the most recent Grand Prix to have taken place, and Racing Bulls currently sits at 66 points. The Racing Bulls VCarb 03 has so far been driven by 3 drivers. Liam Lawson, who was retained following 2025, British Indian rookie Arvid Lindblad, who replaced the Red Bull-bound Hajar, and Yuki Tsunoda, who would return to the team to replace Lawson, who would replace Hajar at Red Bull for the Dutch Grand Prix after he hurt his wrist. Sounds familiar? The Faenza-based team is currently having one of the best seasons in its history, as after a rather shaky start to the season, the team has had a double points finish in all but 2 of the last 7 races, which more than demonstrates the capabilities of the resurgent Liam Lawson and the talented Lindblad. This string of excellent results means that the team is currently sitting at 5th place on the constructors' table, though that streak did come to an end at the Dutch Grand Prix that's just passed. If this form continues, then the team could be on course to finish 5th for the first time in its history, achieving former team principal Franz Tost's long-time goal of finishing 5th. He always said that was the goal for the team at the start of the season, and for the first time in its history, that may well even happen. But we still have to wait and see, because the season is only half done.